Welcome to the channel. In today's video, we will read a story about a man was trying to be kicked out of his own house by his neglectful father and his evil stepmother to give it to his spoiled, pregnant stepsister. Let us begin, shall we? My dad, a 62-year-old man who has barely been present in my life, suddenly got interested in me when he found out about my new job and house. At 34, I've worked hard for everything I have. I've spent years building my career and finally managed to buy my own place, a goal I never thought I'd reach. But now, after years of neglect, my dad has come knocking with an unreasonable request to give up my house for my stepsister, Ash, who is pregnant and unemployed. Ash, 29, is my father's golden child. She does nothing but get into trouble and make poor decisions. She's a self-proclaimed escort and OnlyFans model, neither of which have helped her find stability. Recently, her boyfriend dumped her when he found out she was pregnant, and now she's in a crisis. My dad, feeling the need to fix everything, has decided that I should sacrifice everything I've worked for to give her a place to stay. I've had enough of being treated as the family's last resort when they need something. I want to clarify something. I'm venting. I know I'll get criticism, but this is the one place I can truly express my feelings. Now, let's talk about Ash. She's 5 years younger than me, and ever since I was a kid, my dad has coddled her. My stepsister's career choices disgust me. She's an escort, selling her body for money, and she has an OnlyFans page that's failed to gain traction. Her poor choices aren't my problem, but my dad thinks they are. The first time I learned about her escorting was through a friend who had a brief encounter with her. I didn't want to confront her directly, so I kept my distance. Her behavior only got worse. She'd sneak out to meet men, sometimes older men who gave her flowers. I was raised with a strong sense of work ethic and respect, but she seemed to be doing the opposite. Still, I've kept my distance and tried to focus on my life. My dad, on the other hand, is the root of all this trouble. He's a miserly, self-centered man who abandoned me emotionally and financially. When I was a kid, he and my mom separated, and shortly after he married Marissa, my stepmother. Marissa was never kind to me. She treated me like an inconvenience, and when my mom died, I was sent away to boarding school. I haven't lived with my dad much since then, but I've always known where his priorities lie. Ash comes first. As a kid, I didn't understand why my dad treated me the way he did. My mom always defended him, telling me that he wasn't a bad person, just different. But I never understood how someone could neglect their own child so easily. When I was 4, my parents divorced. 2 months later, my dad married Marissa. They had Ash when I was 5. My mom died shortly after in a car crash. I was left alone, confused, and with a father who never cared for me the way I needed him to. I've worked hard to get where I am today. I've managed to build a stable career and even bought my own house. It's the first time I've had a place to call my own, and I'm proud of it. But my dad didn't share my excitement. Instead, he seemed envious and distant. He made passive-aggressive comments during my housewarming, but I didn't let it bother me. I was proud of my achievements, and his disapproval wasn't going to ruin it for me. A week later, my dad called me. He wanted to meet, and I agreed, unsure of what was coming. When I walked into the room, I could tell something was wrong. Marissa and Ash were sitting on the couch, both of them glaring at me. My dad was in the kitchen, getting a beer. He offered me one, and I declined. I wasn't in the mood for his games. He sat down and immediately started criticizing me for not being more involved in the family. He said I'd become too proud of my success and ignored the people who mattered to me. I asked what was going on, and that's when Ash dropped the bombshell. She was pregnant. I was caught off guard, but before I could congratulate her, she started crying. Marissa and my dad seemed to think I should offer her my support, but all I could think was, can she afford it? I didn't want to be rude, but it seemed like a valid question. Ash couldn't even support herself, let alone a child. That's when my dad told me what he wanted. He said I should give my house to Ash. He didn't care about the financial strain it would cause me. He insisted that I move out and buy another house for myself, while Ash took over mine. I tried to reason with him, explaining that Ash couldn't even pay the bills, but he wouldn't listen. He said it was my responsibility to help her, as a brother. I wasn't about to give up my house. I'd worked too hard for it, and I wasn't going to let my father, who had neglected me for so many years, dictate my life now. I told him I could help financially, but the house was mine, That's when he lost it. He screamed at me, insisting I give it to Ash. And when I refused, he showed up a week later with movers. They were throwing my things out, all without my permission. I couldn't believe it. I tried to stop them, but my dad and Ash didn't care. They just kept demanding that I do the right thing and give Ash the house. I lost my cool. I called the cops on them, and they finally left, cursing me as they went. But the whole experience left me shaken. I feel guilty for what happened, but I also know I was in the right. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I'm not going to let my father manipulate me into giving it all away. A week passed, and I started questioning whether I had made the right decision. I hadn't spoken to Ash since that day, but she reached out to me. She wanted to meet. We sat down at a coffee shop, and she seemed different. Nervous, even. She told me that her boyfriend didn't leave her because of the pregnancy, as my dad believed. In fact, he broke up with her because of her commitment issues. She explained that she had been involved in some shady things in her past, things that her boyfriend discovered just before the pregnancy news came out. He confronted her, and when she tried to explain, he got violent. He put a hole in the wall and then left her. She went on to explain how her mother, Marissa, pushed her into a life she never wanted. Marissa told her to use her looks to find a rich man, which led to Ash becoming an escort and doing OnlyFans. It was a vicious cycle of bad decisions and abuse. Ash admitted she didn't want to live that life anymore, but she didn't know how to get out. She wanted to change, but she felt trapped by the choices she had made. I didn't know how to respond to all of this. I wanted to be supportive, but it was hard. Ash had made so many poor choices, and I wasn't sure how much I could help her. I told her that I couldn't give up my house, but I would help her with whatever she needed. I didn't want to turn my back on her, but I also couldn't keep enabling her behavior. As I left that meeting, I felt conflicted. Part of me wanted to help Ash, but another part of me felt like I had already done enough. She had to take responsibility for her actions, and I couldn't continue to carry the burden for her. I don't know where this will go, but I'm done being the family's scapegoat. I've earned my success, and it's time I start putting myself first. Another week has passed, and things have unfolded. Thought I'd update you all on what's been going on. First off, thank you for the support on my last post. It felt so good to have people backing me, for once. Anyway, after I met Ash, I got a call from Dad. He wanted to meet me at the bar and talk things through. Curious, I agreed and met him there. We sat at the counter, and he told me he knew how much I was earning. When I asked why that mattered, he mentioned that I could afford to buy another house in a few years. I shrugged and told him I already had one, and the topic was done. But he insisted I didn't have a family yet, and it would be harder for a woman to raise a child alone. That kid needs a safe space, he said. I reminded him that Ash had been living with them for a while, and nothing seemed to be an issue. A baby wouldn't change much. I also asked what she would do living alone while pregnant. She needed to be surrounded by people who could take care of her. That's when Dad shocked me. He said that he and Marissa would move in with Ash in my house. I couldn't believe my ears. Before I could react, the bartender chuckled sarcastically, and Dad asked him what was so funny. The bartender said Ash uses everyone and then throws them away. My dad, in shock, asked if the guy knew who he was talking about, and he nodded, saying he was Ash's boyfriend. My eyes widened. This was the guy. Dad's anger flared, and he sternly confronted the guy, asking why he thought it was okay to start a family he couldn't support. The bartender, Bob, calmly explained that he didn't want kids, had a vasectomy, and didn't want to raise someone else's. He mentioned Ash had lied to him and he'd seen her with different men. Bob found out she had an OnlyFans and couldn't believe it. When she told him about the pregnancy, that was the last straw. Dad's face shifted between anger, shock, and disappointment as he listened to Bob. He shrugged and said he owed Ash nothing. Instead, she owed him money, time, and love. Bob said no dad would be proud of a kid like Ash. Dad got up without a word, walked out, and later texted me saying he had to pick up Marissa from her yoga class. I'm sure something happened after that because the next day, Ash showed up at my door crying. She said I ruined everything. I pulled her inside, calmed her down, and told her I didn't tell Dad anything. It was her boyfriend who had been the bartender. She told me Dad had confronted her, told her to quit everything and stay at home. He was disgusted with her and didn't think she'd ever resort to that kind of thing. He also said her chances of finding a good man were slim now. As she told me this, She mentioned that Marissa had been quiet when Dad was talking about good women and loyalty. Ash said one of the things Marissa couldn't speak about was yoga. I didn't get it at first, but it stuck with me. What do you all think really happened? Is Ash still going to be Dad's pride? I'll keep you updated. Update. Just 2 days after my last post, here's the latest for those asking. Ash's ex's name doesn't matter, but let's call him Bob for now. So I went to meet Dad the day before yesterday. I told him I decided I wanted to help raise Ash's kid and was ready to offer her a room. I'd pay for diapers, but she needed to get a job as soon as possible. Dad seemed calmer than usual, and after a pause, he sighed. He told me he thought I hated him, and I asked why. He said it was because Mom hated him too. I told him she never said that, only that he loved me. I explained how disappointed I was, how my perception of him had been wrong. Mom had always said he cared, but I felt neglected by him. Dad rubbed his eyes and admitted he hated himself for a lot of things. He said he'd loved Mom, but they hadn't been together long enough to know if they were actually a match. He then met Marissa, who sparked something in him he didn't know he had. Things happened quickly, and before he knew it, Marissa was pregnant. He told her to wait, but she felt insecure and came to our house. She confronted Mom, and after a very painful argument, Mom asked for a divorce. Dad took a moment to explain that after Mom died, he'd spent a good year with Marissa, but when it was time to bring me back home, she became insecure again. Dad sent me away to boarding school. I never knew any of this. As Dad continued, he told me how he'd been conflicted about Marissa, but she'd trapped him by getting pregnant. And now, he was facing the consequences of everything. Just then, Marissa walked in, and when she left for yoga class, I followed her. She parked outside a yoga club, then got into a car with another man. They kissed and drove off. I parked and went inside the yoga club to ask about her, but they denied any knowledge of her attending. I waited in the parking lot, and when the car returned, I started recording. Marissa was kissing the guy, and he slapped her butt as they walked into the parking lot. So much for yoga. I didn't pick up Dad's calls after that. The next update is coming soon. I don't know what to do about the video, but I'm conflicted. Marissa begged me to give it to her, asking me to think about Ash. But honestly, Marissa, it's your kid, your problem. What should I do? Delete the video or hand it over? I'll keep you posted. Update 3. I know it's been a week, but a lot has happened. I finally confronted Marissa when Dad wasn't home. I asked her about her yoga class, and she seemed caught off guard. After some questioning, I told her I knew the truth. She denied it at first, but when I played the video, she admitted everything. She confessed that she'd been seeing another man for 3 years and even got pregnant by him. She pinned the pregnancy on Dad for support. Just then, Dad walked in. His fists were clenched, and he was shaking. He woke Ash up and asked her who her father was. Ash, to her credit, didn't care about blood. She always saw Dad as her dad. Marissa and Ash were told to leave Dad's house, and the divorce is in process. Ash and Marissa are now staying at a shelter, and Dad has asked me to find him a therapist. He's apologized many times, and I forgive him each time. As for Marissa, her lover didn't take her in. He denies having any contact with her, and I have the proof. She's begged me for it, even asking me to think about Ash's pregnancy. But Marissa, this is your problem now. Should I delete the video or hand it over? I'll update you all later. Your support and suggestions mean a lot to me. Thanks for being with me through all of this. And that's the end of this story. Leave your comments in the comment sections to tell us how you feel about this story, and I will see you in the next video.